Here goes an effort to try to do this crazy thing with this video, and as you know, I like cats. So today I'm a cat. I don't think this is really picking me up, but oh well. It's a nice cat. Okay, Joshua Sarnataro asks, why did North America implement the North American Free Trade Agreement to let millions of Americans come to America? Isn't that a big reason why we have an immigration problem? No, actually, it's not. NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, had nothing to do with immigration. In fact, it totally ignored immigration, which may sound pretty amazing, but there it is. So we will talk some about NAFTA, but it is a free trade agreement, and they meant stuff. They didn't mean people. Patrick Murphy, thank you for typing. It's so nice. You say that Beyond Smoke and Mirrors claims Mexicans planned only to stay temporarily. So why don't we allow either temporary work permits or let people cross the border more easily? Those are great ideas, Patrick. Push them in Washington, because we should be doing a lot more of that. And the Beyond Smoke and Mirrors people would agree with you. In 4 Generations, the writer mentions the psychological costs of immigration. Does that mean that mandatory courses on American culture and English would discourage immigration? Actually, I think the opposite. It would make people feel more comfortable here, and so they probably would feel more ready to stay if they could. Now, Christopher McFadden, you want to know, why is it that Mexican women are less likely to return to Mexico after migrating than Mexican men are? I think women come as more of a life choice than as a temporary work arrangement, because they're not thought of as the breadwinners for their families the way men are, and so they therefore are less mobile. There are also issues of kids which complicate anybody's ability to be mobile. You wouldn't know about that yet probably, but just take it from me. Michael Staley asks, with all the discussion of settled and unsettled migration, I haven't seen any discussion addressing why or why not Mexican migrants integrate into U.S. society. What factors isolate some migrants and encourage others to integrate? We don't do very much for integration of migrants. That's something we're going to talk more about, maybe particularly in the context of refugees, but it's a much more general issue. And so I don't think it would really be reasonable to say people are determined not to integrate, although there certainly are reasons like age that prevent people from learning the language and therefore slow down integration. So there are factors. It could probably be studied more, but we need to be thinking of that in the context of a very weak policy on the part of the United States to integrate people. Okay. You also asked, do wives of migrants decide to cross to reunite family, or because their husbands encourage them to come to find work? Probably a combination of both. Does money sent back to Mexico have more of a community effect or more of an individual effect? This has been studied a lot, believe it or not. Mexico cares a lot about this issue and so has devoted some resources to it. And it considers it a problem that so much of that money does go for individual families, and that's not really a surprise. There are organizations of Oaxacans, for example, that work on community projects, but a lot is going to individual families and therefore not really improving the economy as much as it could. Caitlin Lucas, you want to know, what are some of the main problems for the immigrant during the crossing process? I would say water would be number one. Crossing, if you go through a desert or a mountain range, can be a killing experience. What are the statistics on immigrants returning to Mexico? I don't have them at hand. It's a significant number. It is mentioned in your 4 Generations. We could look that up. Anyway, this thing is saying it can't track my face. Oh well. Maybe if I move it a little bit, it will. Brian Johnson, you want to know when apprehensions and line watch hours have increased, why is it that migrants don't experience a higher risk of arrest or deportation? Actually, it depends on the number of migrants. If the number of migrants is increasing and also apprehensions, it could be exactly the same fear or the same risk of apprehension. But the big story is that apprehension doesn't necessarily stop people from migrating eventually. So in terms of the effect of all those apprehensions, it could be very small. Might look good for Border Patrol statistics, but not very good for reducing immigration. Okay, you also ask, Brian, good question here. What exactly is the role of the coyote? It's a good question, but we're going to talk about that in another couple of weeks, and we've got a good reading on it, so I'm going to leave that off for now. The Bracero program, that's another one that's coming up. Brittany, thank you for yours. Brittany Miller, you say that in the 20s, immigrants used to go north of the border with the intention of returning south after a short period of time. Have things changed so much in Mexico that people now want to move here permanently, or is it because the U.S. has become more desirable? I would say it's probably neither one. It's more because the border has become more uncrossable. Steve Young, you ask, how are immigrants able to receive unemployment, food stamps, welfare, and schooling for their children without documentation? Well, the answer is they don't, except for the schooling part. And if you're thinking, well, I know that some folks are getting things like food stamps, you have to remember that there are often citizen children or other citizen family members, even in undocumented families, and we do not discriminate on the basis of your parents' legal status. Okay, one last question here from Dan Rummel. How long does it take for an immigrant to complete the various processes for legal entrance? Citizenship, green card. 5 years is the citizenship basic minimum, and that's working from a green card. We'll talk in more detail about that soon, but it's relatively easy at this stage. It used to be longer in our history. One time it was 14 years, by the way. There's a different tendency for people to go for citizenship by country, by age, and probably by times in our history. We're at a high point now. Final question. In 4 Generations, it talks about all migrants viewing their journey as a temporary thing, almost a means to an end. With all that we have here, why don't they plan to stay in the United States for good? Well, maybe because they love where they came from, if only they could make it work financially. Anyway, good questions, all of them. Talk to you soon. I hope this works. All right.